Morning, dudes. We'll wait and see if Ryan pops in or not. He said something about travel, yada, yada, yada. I'm not sure. I wasn't really listening well. So if he does, we'll, just let him join right in and all that good stuff. But I'll get the legals out of the way, out of the way. It's been a week. I've been gone. I don't know. I'm no longer capable of doing this. So I apologize. But, you get the legals out of the way before he jumps in, and if he does jump in, he'll get to say it again, I guess. But nothing in this spaces, anything that I say constitutes trading advice by any means. I don't know why you would listen to me unless you pay me, and then in that case, that's still crazy. But it's not trading advice. Don't sue me or Ryan or PAQ for it, because that'd be bad. So, let's dive in head first, shall we? Now that we have much to talk about. But happy Monday. We had a Trump tweet last night. Took me right back to 2018, 2019, and I don't hate it. For those of you that are, you're online already, so all of you know if you're on the Twitter side of things. But Trump did tweet overnight, about China. Basically, China is worried about its shortage of soybeans. So if you haven't been paying attention to what has been taking place in China, you've seen, domestic prices start to surge. You've seen, basically private crushers really reach out and try to get as much coverage as they possibly could, from anyone but the U.S. Like, you haven't had any sort of freight conversations from, the U.S. to China. They're really listening, to the powers that be and ignoring U.S. offers. In addition, we do have a 25%-ish sort of tariff on our beans right now. Unless you're a government entity or whatever, you're going to end up paying a lot more for soybeans than even, what you're paying out of Brazil there. So you have seen a bit in the way of what some have called a little bit of a short squeeze or a cash, short squeeze, or an expectation at least that one would happen. And Chinese prices have moved higher. So he's not completely wrong in the sense of them being worried about a shortage of soybeans, but the shortage of soybeans is, man-made at this point. So our great farmers, he says, produce the most robust soybeans. I may be partial, but I agree with that. And so he hopes that China would quickly quadruple its soybean orders. So at this point, as everyone loves to point out, China currently has zero soybeans on the books, meaning, if for those of you that learned your multiplication tables in third grade, 0 times any number is still 0. So, a lot of tongue in cheek in the sense of, like, if they quadruple their soybean orders, there's nothing there, yada, yada, yada. But I do think, it's something that we need to be kind of aware of, or at least looking at, simply because I don't think it's necessarily one second. Sorry, phone call. I don't think it's, necessarily going to be trade driven, but I do think it's one of those deals where, China is using or holding back on making these purchases, for a reason, to be able to kind of have this sort of, hey, yeah, we need to make purchases. At this point in time, AgriInvest estimates that China has to purchase, right around 17 million metric tons just to get their normal usage covered through the end of the year. You'll probably tap in another 6 million in January before you're able to see the Brazil bushels really start to move, or South American bushels start to move. And so China, I feel, is really kind of using this, sort of as leverage. Now, one thing that I think is super interesting that isn't necessarily, tied directly to agriculture, but I do think that they have some level of, I think you have to watch. I think it is an important factor to kind of be aware of, is we did also see though, that Trump and like NVIDIA, AMD, some of these major chip producers, which NVIDIA is a US based chip technology producer who basically provides 90% plus of chip technology to the world. You have seen conversation now where Trump and these chip producers have agreed that they will give 15% of their revenue to the U.S. government, basically, when it comes to these sales that they're making in China. And then they are, they're basically able to sell these chips without export controls. I've said this for months now. The introduction of the chip technology into this conversation makes this whole entire thing a whole entire different set of negotiation, in my opinion, than what you had other phone call, the first go around. And so it's one of those things where I think we are, seeing, hey, yes, we are going to open up we're going to take away these export controls. We're going to open up these chip shipments. In turn, we want you to tell us you're doing these things with, fentanyl. You're also going to make, an increase in certain levels of purchases, and yada, yada, yada. And so I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, everything could fall apart. You've got a lot of uncertainty when it comes to, what happens with Russia and these secondary tariffs. Trump was asked, would you tariff China if they are buying, Russian oil? And he's like, I might. I guess I would have to. And so there's still a lot of moving pieces in all of this conversation here. But I'd argue we have to be a little careful simply because the market seems to be pricing in no China demand, and really kind of ignoring the fact that our old crop sales continue to grow. We continue to kind of outpace where we should be. With USDA projections for old crop, a lot of those sales are likely to be moved forward or rolled forward into new. And then as I said before, as we see the South American supplies dwindle, you will see the world end users turn to the U.S. and start to make some purchases of soybeans. We'll just have to see how that all plays out. Over into that sort of next in line, Russia, Ukraine. We do have what looks to be a gathering of at least Putin and Trump in Alaska on Friday. Zelensky's been like, yo, what about me? Like, I thought I was important here. And so we're not sure. The White House says it's still considering whether or not it's going to invite Ukraine, to the conversation, which is interesting. I mean, at this point, I guess, are we going to see if Putin has changed his level of demands or not? Basically the demands have been the same since the start of the war. He wants certain things. Ukraine can't, get into NATO. There's supposed to be certain, setups with the West and how they can handle, some of these, placements of military installments and yada, yada, yada. And so, we'll see what the conversation looks like. It'll be interesting to see if Putin even remotely changes what his tune has been. And Zelensky's been like, yo, we're not giving up any of our ground. Now, basically one of the things that has been a known for a while is that the reality of a peace deal is probably going to involve, freezing the front line and some of these other things. And so, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. We'll obviously have major factors, or it could have major factors on, how grain moves, how, Russia is in the world market, what happens with Ukraine. In addition, though, I am watching, just more in the way of grain movement out of Russia and Ukraine. There's a lot of talk that Ukraine is struggling with really low quality wheat again this year. And that production's probably a couple, 2 to 4 million metric ton, below, where the market's been trading for a while here on the wheat side of things. There's also talk that the corn crop is struggling. You look at, satellite imagery and some of these other things, and you can definitely see that there are some potential production issues there. And so we'll continue to really watch how that whole dynamic sets up, because, that also will have a huge implication, or could have a huge influence on what we see for new crop corn exports, simply because right now Brazil's basically surprised the world by not coming in to the market as much as what was anticipated. They've gotten to the mostly to the end of harvest. A lot of the corn is put away. Brazil is upwards of 40, 50 cents more expensive than US values. Typically, we would see Ukraine step in, or the EU step in and start putting bushels into the world pipeline here as we get closer to new crop. And we're not seeing that. And so, there's a lot of factors that we have to be watching when it comes to corn exports. But the biggest thing that I'm seeing right now is not only are you seeing a lack of movement out of Brazil, versus expectations. Like, there's a lot of talk there that we should see the export book be reduced even further out of Brazil. Like, you're going to struggle to see them aggressively sell into this market without some type of rally or currency shift. The Brazilian farmer is likely to hold pretty tight until we get into, November, December timeframe. And so that's going to be something to watch, simply because the U.S. right now is the best priced, most reliable, highest quality supplier. So lastly, we obviously have a handful or a slew of big information, big data inputs that we'll see First one we'll get today will be export inspections. That'll come out at 11 Eastern, just to see if we have a continuation of strong export demand. I like to look to wheat more than any, right now, more than anything. Obviously, we need to continue to make sure that we're shipping corn and soybeans, but we're in the beginning of the wheat export book, and we have this window of opportunity to kind of aggressively ship into the world market before the other commodities take its place or take priority. And so we really need to kind of be shipping like hell wouldn't have it on the wheat side, and continue to do the same for corn and beans because we have a big book on. We'll get crop progress this afternoon. Lots of folks will be looking at that, probably updating their yield estimates ahead of tomorrow's USDA number. And so, really most of the day today will be kind of just positioning yourselves, or some folks positioning themselves, waiting to hear, if we get a response out of China, or if, and if we do, what does that look like? But with the report out tomorrow, in this sort of continuation of poor sentiment in this market, like I've never seen poor sentiment before. Everyone kind of seems to feel like we're continuing to underestimate production potential. Like everyone's numbers are still really lofty on the production side. And folks are continuing to point towards the idea that we have poor demand, or that, everyone in corn likes to point out that Brazil still has a big chunk of bushels that could move into the pipeline. We're just not seeing it yet. But market wise here, 3 minutes before the open, we are seeing soybeans kind of maintain some of that strength, though they are 11 cents off the spike high that they had achieved right after Trump's tweet or post on Truth Social. Corn's up about a penny or whatever. Weather-wise, a lot of folks are looking at the above normal temperatures forecast for the next couple of weeks and saying that's fine because it looks like there's some rain. I will say locally here, anecdotally, and I know Michigan doesn't matter much, but we've went backwards very quickly, and we've just kind of turned off pretty warm and dry. And it looks like we'll continue to be. Fingers crossed we get a dose of rain tomorrow like they're calling. If we don't, and again, not like Michigan matters too awful much, but it all matters. And I think you're going to see some conversation, kind of echoing that in the Eastern Corn Belt. I'll be watching too some of this disease talk in the Western Belt, just to see we're a week out from Pro Farmer Crop Tour, and lots of things to be paying attention to. So happy Monday. With that, I will let you guys be free, and we'll see where we end up. We'll be back in the morning. Ryan will join us. He'll be not traveling. He was basically, I think he's at the airport, or he's trying to get his passport. Like I said, I wasn't listening. He told me. I just was like, that sounds great. I'm not reading all of that. Good for you. We're sorry about what happened. So if you guys need anything, as always, give me a holler. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow. We'll go from there.